Welcome back to It's Called Football as we get ready to bring you a very, very action-packed set of results from Matchday 14 of the Premier League. The festive season has kicked in, and the Premier League was kind enough to grace us with lots of action, lots of goals, and tons and tons of stories as we head into a jam-packed period of games. A reminder of some of the games that we saw starting out this weekend set of matches. We had five on Saturday, five on Sunday, and the reason why the fixtures have been condensed into just the weekend we'll get into just a little later. We saw current league leaders Arsenal welcoming Wolves, who have been uh, the subject of many poor officiating decisions, probably more than any other club so far in the Premier League this year. Brentford hosted Luton Town, who were just outside the relegation zone. Burnley and Sheffield United went head to head in what we recommended as one of our featured matches for you to try to tune into because both teams were in the bottom three places and facing off against your fellow endangered teams. Uh, it usually does create for some real spectacles. Nottingham Forest then took on Everton, with both teams trying to look for a bounce back after losing the previous weekday. And finally, Newcastle versus Manchester United was Saturday's late game. Arsenal probably should have run away with their game against Wolves the way they played, but ultimately in the end, the scoreline perhaps looks a little narrower than the play suggested for large chunks of the game. Arsenal raced into a 2-0 lead early on within the opening quarter of an hour and then took their foot off the gas a little bit, perhaps naively. And there's no game in the league where you can do that with the teams and the quality that's available. Wolves did manage to get one back after a defensive mistake by Arsenal, but the league leaders did hang on to take all 3 points and continue their stay at the top for now. Brentford didn't really have much difficulty dispatching of Luton Town. There was a short spell when Brentford were 2-0 up and Luton clawed one back, but Brentford soon scored a third to put the game back out of reach of Luton and seal what was honestly an expected result. Burnley defied the odds, and finally, the home support over there managed to see something, and they were rewarded for all their loyalty and their devotion by seeing Burnley dismantle Sheffield United 5-0 in a game that has now helped Burnley move off the bottom spot in the table. Everton, who were hit by that points deduction, also managed to get a win this time around against Nottingham Forest, a very tough place to go, even at the best of times. And Everton obviously are in a less than ideal situation, but they still managed to get that all important one goal, which got them all 3 points and might be helping Everton on their way to try and move out of the bottom three after their points deduction. Manchester United, on the other hand, despite beating Everton last week, couldn't carry that form through into this week and fell to a 1-0 defeat at Newcastle. In truth, Newcastle probably could have scored four or five, but a mix of good goalkeeping from Manchester United and just poor finishing of chances from Newcastle is the only thing that makes this look like a respectable scoreline. Sunday's games saw Bournemouth host Aston Villa, Chelsea host Brighton, Liverpool welcome Fulham to town, West Ham take on in a London derby against Crystal Palace, and then the featured match Manchester City against Tottenham Hotspur. Bournemouth and Villa ultimately, the scoreline kind of reflects the path that the two teams are on. Villa have been generally very, very strong this season and only had minor blips in form. Bournemouth started poorly but have seemed to get better and better for most of the recent weeks. And ultimately, they cancelled each other out in a 2-2 draw. Bournemouth were leading 1-0 and 2-1 for decent portions of the game. which was probably fair given how the two teams have played in recent weeks. Chelsea managed to hang in there for an all-important win against Brighton. Now, Brighton is a very difficult team to play for most of the top sides, most teams really in general. And for Chelsea, this is huge to manage to get all 3 points at home against a side that has caused problems for so many teams. Liverpool also had to really, really work hard, but ultimately did come out on top in their match against Fulham. A little more about that later. Fulham did fight really, really well. They fought valiantly. They put in everything they had, and they actually had a very good game plan. But at the end of the day, Liverpool's individual quality is just too much, especially at home. Don't know where they get this extra surge of energy and confidence from, but at home, Liverpool are ridiculous. And not surprised that Liverpool won, but it was surprising about the manner in which they did. West Ham and Palace, a draw, honestly, was quite a fair result. Palace will be happier probably with that because they've lost some games recently that they would have hoped not to lose. And West Ham, despite a very strong initial start in the opening weeks of the season back in August and September, have sort of lulled their way into just below the top 7 or 8 teams in the league so far. And then Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur did not disappoint at all, as this fixture rarely does. With the game ending 3-3, and Tottenham will by far be the happier of the two teams. We'll get a little into that a little bit more later. So, not a ton of movement in the top half of the table right now. Arsenal's win means that they are the first team in the league to 10 wins this season, and maintain their hold on top spot. Given that City dropped points with their draw, Liverpool have now leapfrogged them with their own win, despite it being very hard fought. And it's it's um, it's difficult to predict exactly where this is going to go because Liverpool are looking strong in an attacking sense, but their defense obviously leaves something to be desired. Manchester City is similar. They always have a deadly attack, but their defense doesn't quite seem to be on the same level as they have for the last 2 or 3 years. And Arsenal defensively look quite solid at the moment, but that perhaps has come at a bit of a cost to their attacking fluidity. Nevertheless, the top three remain the same, but Liverpool now takes second place, and Arsenal now have a 2 point lead on second place as opposed to the one they had going into the weekend. Aston Villa and Tottenham both drawing mean that they both stay in fourth and fifth, respectively. Newcastle's win, while big, has been enough to take them up ahead of Manchester United, but not yet enough to break into those top 4 or 5 places. That being said, another match day where Villa or Spurs drop points and Newcastle win, and they will be up there. Manchester United obviously have dropped back down to seventh at the moment and back into a negative goal difference. It is a bit of a concern for them for sure, as we are now in December, nearly 4 months into the season, and United haven't quite hit the same consistency that they would want in all competitions that United have played so far. They've played 20 games and they've now won 10 and lost 10. So not exactly what they would want at this stage, and almost unheard of for Manchester United to be in such patchy form. But hey, that's the way football works sometimes. Brighton losing for them, luckily, it meant that they didn't lose their eighth spot right now because West Ham also failed to win. West Ham's draw means that they remain in ninth, Brighton remain in eighth, and Chelsea's win brings them closer to eighth and ninth place. But there was too much of a points gap going into this weekend for them to usurp that position for anyone else. Nevertheless, Chelsea do spend another week in the top half, which is where they would at least want to be as a minimum right now. The bottom half of the table sees Brentford leading the way there in 11th. They would have obviously leapfrogged Chelsea if Chelsea had failed to beat Brighton. And at the moment, Brentford and Chelsea are on the exact same goal difference, but Chelsea have scored more goals, which is why they sit in 10th and Brentford 11th. Wolves losing uh, to Arsenal, combined with Crystal Palace getting a draw at West Ham, means Palace now move into 12th, a point ahead of the next two teams. Fulham's narrow defeat means that they are unable to move up any places. The same goes for Forest with their loss to Everton and Bournemouth with their draw against Aston Villa. Luton's defeat doesn't mean that they move up, obviously, but they couldn't move down either because they had enough breathing space ahead of the bottom three teams. However, since Everton and Burnley both got big wins, big at least as in terms of important, they both move up, with Sheffield United dropping back down into 20th, where they spent several weeks of the season already. Big concerns there at Sheffield United because they have now been soundly beaten in three of their games already this season, where Burnley and Arsenal both beat them 5-0, and Newcastle, if you remember a few weeks ago, managed to go to Sheffield United and win 8-0. So, some of the big moments from this match day. Arsenal obviously will be thrilled to hold on to top spot for another week going into December, where there's a busy month of fixtures and some very tough games coming up. It was very important for Arsenal that when they played first, they had to make sure they set down a marker that everyone else had to try and live up to. As we know now from the results, not every team was able to do that. Manchester City dropped points, Manchester United lost, Tottenham obviously have dropped points with their draw, and Liverpool only just managing to keep pace at the moment, despite the quality in their goals. Very special mention to Vincent Company. He seems like a very hardworking and a good manager and just a good person in general. So me personally, I'm quite happy to see that Burnley have finally recorded their first home win. Their fans must be absolutely delighted that it was such a strong, commanding victory, despite it being against arguably the team's poorest, or the league's poorest team so far. Everton also deserves some credit. Last weekend, when they played Manchester United, that was off the back of their points deduction, which has left them in a relegation battle for the time being. And if that points deduction had never happened, and I do feel it's harsh that it did happen, then Everton's victory and the points total they would have been on would actually have been nearly enough for them to break into the top half of the league. Given how they were for the last couple of years, that would have been a huge improvement. That being said, this was a big win for them and hopefully a platform that they build on to get themselves out of trouble soon anyway. And Newcastle's Anthony Gordon is going from strength to strength. He has now scored and been just a part in general of crucial wins over Arsenal, Chelsea, and now Manchester United, where Gordon scored the winning goal. Newcastle do look like they're just continuing to be a threat, and they're showing that they're not going anywhere from this battle up near the top of the table. The Premier League is famous for classic results, high-scoring games from both sides, and not just one-sided thrashings. And in recent match days, the league has been living up to those kinds of games again. If you remember, Chelsea and Manchester City played out an amazing 4-4 draw a couple of weeks ago, and this weekend actually provided two thrillers like that and two potentially all-time classic games to look back at. The first one's a bit of a surprise as Liverpool were made to work really hard for a 4-3 win against Fulham. Fulham have generally not been all that good this season, but Liverpool scored four goals of immense quality, once in a lifetime strikes. The first goal for Liverpool, which has gone down as an own goal, I don't really know why, because it was an amazing free kick from Trent Alexander-Arnold. Liverpool's right back, who also eventually ended up scoring the winning goal. You can see the timings on those goals. Liverpool went ahead twice in the first half. Fulham pegged them back both times, and Fulham actually went ahead in the 80th minute. I actually said on Twitter at the time that Fulham had scored that third goal too early. Liverpool at home are a weird sort of beast that they will only get riled up more and more under adversity. And if you score with 10 minutes plus stoppage time still left in the game against Liverpool at Anfield, you need to be at the very, very top of your game to keep them out, even though it's close to the end of the game and both teams have been working hard. And Liverpool showed that. It took them 2 minutes, 87 and 88, for them to equalize with another strike outside the box, and then for Trent Alexander-Arnold to win it with a beautiful right-footed effort from the edge of the box as well. And Liverpool do scrape their way to victory here and keep pace at the top. They are definitely a contender for the league title this season. Manchester City and Tottenham had a very different type of game. Tottenham still have lots of injuries and suspensions, and they had to go in with a makeshift defense or a back four. That being said, Tottenham did take the lead after some early Man City pressure, with their captain Heung-min Son scoring first to put them ahead, and then he almost immediately went and deflected a Man City free kick into his own net a few minutes later to level the game. The last thing you need when you're going to Man City is to just help them put the ball in your own net. City then had a really well worked move, which was finished off by Phil Foden. And honestly, City could have scored five or six in the first half alone, but they just didn't take their chances. It was very weird to see Erling Haaland miss the opportunities he did, the clear goal scoring chances that he had. Eventually, they were made to pay because Tottenham made some substitutions and Giovanni Lo Celso equalized with a shot from outside the box, which City's keeper arguably should have saved, but it was only able to tip it onto the post and in. And then Spurs were almost the architects of their own downfall because they gave the ball away near their own defense. City passed the ball around quickly, clinically, and Jack Grealish finished off the opportunity, only for Spurs to equalize right near the end of the game as Dejan Kulusevski leapt highest to head the ball in off the underside of the bar in the last minute to tie it up. That being said, a classic match is not always a classic without a little bit of controversy, and we know the officials this season just love to be at the very center of attention, and we just couldn't get one match day without escaping from that. Erling Haaland and most of the Man City players were furious with referee Simon Hooper in this match because of this incident. Erling Haaland was fouled. He got up, and the ref played advantage, as you can see in this still. Haaland got up and managed to play a lofted pass for Jack Grealish, who you can see leftmost in the blue shirt, surrounded by three players. He did manage to stay onside, run past them, and looked to be racing through on goal when the ref blew his whistle and decided to cancel advantage and call it back for the free kick. City were absolutely incensed, and it was completely the wrong decision on the ref's part, has to be said. Um, Given that he called advantage, that was the right call. Then City actually used that advantage well, or they looked to be using it well. And for some inexplicable reason, the ref called it back. Just one more example of an incompetent ref, corrupt ref. I don't know what you want to call it. It seems almost weird to call it corrupt because Man City are not usually the victims of a poor decision from the officials, but this time they were. Perhaps a little bit of karmic justice. Not sure, but I mean, as a non-City fan, it was amusing a little bit to see that that for once Man City were the team undone by a poor refereeing call. But as a fan of the game in general, I think these standards of officiating do absolutely need to be improved and massively. So, how did we do in our predictions? Well, we started off on a great note because we managed to get the Arsenal Wolves score spot on. Now, I didn't want it to be that close, and the way the opening 15 minutes went, I was desperately hoping it would just turn into a bit of an easy win. But I suppose I should have expected that um, the gods of football would have made this a close game because that's what I expected. Wolves have played well and forced every team to work hard, even when they have beaten them. But you know what? We got the win, and I'll take that as an Arsenal fan. Brentford, I thought would have a completely routine win against Luton, and it was for the most part. But credit to Luton to keep pushing and at least get that one goal. They could have potentially pushed on to make it 2-2, but Brentford are just very strong at home. I did get their number of goals right at least. From what I've seen Burnley do this season, I really didn't think that they would blitz Sheffield United the way they did, but really, really well done by Burnley. Amazingly done. Forest and Everton, I kind of expected it to be a close game, and like I predicted, a one goal margin victory for Everton, but I did think both teams would score. I didn't get the score line quite right, but got the result right. Same goes for Newcastle and Manchester United. I thought that perhaps United would get some confidence from their game against Everton last weekend and try and really go for goals, but they were disappointing. United didn't really offer much threat in the game at all, and the only bit of threat they did offer was quite obviously offside, even though the ball ended up in the net. But margin of victory was what I predicted, so I'm taking that as a partial win, I suppose. Bournemouth impressed me. I thought that Villa would be just a bit too strong for them, even though Bournemouth's had this recent surge in good results and good performances. But full credit, Bournemouth deserved it. Chelsea and Brighton nearly was a draw. Brighton were denied a last minute penalty, which they could have made it 3-3 from, but um, yeah, I didn't know that Chelsea would have it quite in them to see out this victory, especially given that Chelsea got a red card near the end of the first half. So impressive by them. Somehow I got Liverpool's goal scored correctly, but no way could you have ever expected me to predict that Fulham would hit three against Liverpool. It's just not something that anyone would expect, I think, based on performances from both teams this season. But credit to Fulham for fighting hard, but ultimately it was a Liverpool win as I kind of thought it would be. I will be honest, I thought West Ham would have been too much for Palace, but I don't think West Ham were at their best on the day, and Palace did fight hard enough. But it seemed like a match from the early minutes that had a draw written all over it. Obviously, I had no way of guessing that going in. I just thought West Ham had looked the stronger side and should have had enough, but surprised. And same goes for Man City and Spurs. Like I said, Spurs could have been out of sight, like long beaten by halftime, but City were not clinical. They didn't take their chances, and Spurs eventually did. They kept fighting, they kept going at it, and I know a lot of Arsenal fans will. They have this obvious rivalry with Spurs because they're both North London clubs, but a lot of Arsenal fans were saying that they hope Man City destroy Spurs in this game, that they completely blow them out of the water. And for me personally, I sit there reading those kinds of comments or hearing them, and I think, why would you hope for that? This short term amusement at your rival's expense is not worth your title rivals, Man City, getting another win and keeping pace with us. It's just not worth it. So I was quite happy to see a draw. It just means that both teams drop points, so Spurs also don't catch up too much, and Man City fall further behind. I was really hoping Liverpool would drop points as well. Just didn't quite happen, but it's in Arsenal's hands to keep this going if they can. Made for an entertaining game, that last one, absolutely, but I don't think I would have predicted that going in with all of Spurs' injuries. that is where we're going to leave you for this video. It's been a very interesting weekend of games, and we actually have Matchday 15 coming up in midweek, so we will have a video coming out looking ahead to that before Tuesday, because that's when the first matches of Matchday 15 begin. So we'll see you really, really soon. Hope you've all had a good weekend. Take care, stay safe. Please drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share this with other people if you think they'll get something from it or they'll just enjoy it. And yeah, take care. Remember, it's called football.